With week 9 officially wrapping up last night and several teams looking to push their ways into the top 10 as well as the top 12 team playoff, there were several games on tap that could have answered a few questions for many teams and also placed a lot of situations that have been under question into perspective. Want to find out which teams benefited from week 9 and which ones faltered? Stay tuned to find out on Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Welcome back, Gabbers. Thank you all so much for joining us for another edition of Gridiron Gab Triple Option. I am your host, Mr. CeeLo here. Hope you guys are doing great. Just want to get a few things out there. If you guys have things that are going on in your side of the country, please let us know. We always like to make sure that our gabbers are doing well and things are going okay. And if you have a squad that you're repping that you want us to bring their highlights up, no matter what they are, please let us know. But as always, I got to get into the mailbag, which as many of you guys know, I got to give my gab outs to my man Brad. Hope you're doing good, bud. Haven't seen you in person as of late, but I know as always you are a huge fan of the show. I appreciate it, brother. You have a good weekend too, buddy. As always, being the kind, gentle soul that he is, he's awesome. Also a huge Georgia fan. Once again, no, we can't do that. No. Georgia's off this week, so no.
Ew.
And you called the upset in the Hoosiers. No. BYU, yes. He called Navy 38-17. Way off. Bama big, yes, they didn't score 10 points. So yeah, I was not surprised at that outcome, but we'll go through it. 45-3 Miami. Ole Miss, SMU. Pretty close there, Brad. Pretty close there, buddy. But as I said, I appreciate all the love. Gab out to you, my friend, as always. And many of you that are not subscribed and are not watching this show, that are not subscribed and you watching the show, listen, get in here and get your game on and show us what's going on, because Brad definitely is giving his he'll be one of the first that when this platform goes live, he's going to be one of the first that's going to be on here because he's very active and I love that about him. We have these great conversations in person. So this is definitely going to be a lot of fun to watch. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun to do, and we're getting to a point where we're going to do that. But as it stands, let's get into it because we've got a bunch of games to go through, and we've got to go through the top 25 as it has been released. And so many people are looking forward to it. I know I am. Let's get it on. Let's look at number 22, SMU versus the 6-1 Duke Blue Devils, whom I was not aware that this team was as well had the type of record that they had. Because you look at this team and you think, Mike Elko goes to Texas A&M along with Riley Leonard. Oh, that's it. But looking at this game, this shaped up many times to look like a game that was going to be SMU running away with it. But basically at the end of this, it was a blocked field goal. SMU blocked that would have gave Duke the win had it been made. As I said, when you watch a team that is playing in their building, you're supposed to win. And I'm going to always live by that creed. Brad knows that, and many people that know me. You can't get a whole bunch of credit for winning in your building. I don't care who the opponent is. But looking at this game from top to bottom, it was a fun game to watch. I mean, we look at it, and this was a game that was almost 100% evenly matched down the mark, except for one problem. 6 turnovers by the SMU Mustangs.
God damn!
How many times do I tell you, if you are a team that is searching for an upset, You have to capitalize. And when you get 6 turnovers and you didn't turn the ball over once, I know a lot of you guys are going to ask, did they turn it over? No. It was 6-0 turnovers. You get 6 turnovers at any level, you're going to lose. And this is kind of the idea of what would have happened had SMU not turned the football over. But then you can't say that because Duke also played very, very, very good defense. Duke is a defensive football team. They're not a team that overly relies on its offense, but they made plays when they had to. Looking at it from this standpoint, you would be surprised to know that SMU only outgained Duke. Well, they only outgained Duke by 70 yards. Total yards, that is. 6 of 12 on third down compared to 8 of 16 for Duke on third downs. And then you look at the rushing yards for SMU, over 200 rushing yards to only 98 for Duke. So while really look at how this game was played, to me this game was won on the lack of execution by Duke when they had to. You get 6 turnovers. You have to execute, and you really have to get points on the board when they give you those gimmies. And unfortunately, Duke was unable to do it, which even despite all of the hiccups, they were still within a block kick away from winning this game. And this is, to me, a testament of how good SMU was. And Duke just wasn't opportunistic. They just were not. You have to be opportunistic when teams give you gimmies. Malik Murphy was 27 of 48, 295 yards, 3 scores. And Kevin Jennings, in my opinion, despite the 3 interceptions, having 258 and had 41 yards and a touchdown on the ground. And of course, Brashard Smith had 26 carries, 117 yards, 2 scores. But you look at Jennings, had 2 lost fumbles yesterday. So, he had a total of 5 turnovers yesterday. But this is a testament of how good he is. And you got to give SMU's defense a lot of credit, too. This is a team that, you gave back six possessions. This is a team that still was able to hold it together despite the extra possessions. And when you look at the totality of how this game was played out, it just felt like so many times that if SMU could get out of its own way, this game wouldn't even be close. So, yeah, do I think Duke gave them a great matchup? Of course. But the turnovers are the only reason they're in it. But I'll say this is the reality of the game. Turnovers can decide games. And ultimately, as I said, Jennings was the star of this game. And I think if Malik Murphy can become a more of a, I don't want to say a scrambler, but a much more mobile threat, I think he will become a much more complete quarterback. I think that is ultimately a problem that he's dealing with. He's not mobile enough to create plays, or he's not allowing himself to be more mobile. Whereas you've got Kevin Jennings, this team, the offense, lives and dies by his mobility. And they were still able to win this football game despite 6 turnovers, 5 of them being committed by himself. SMU 28, Duke 27. Now, looking at the number 19 Pitt Panthers 41-13 victory over Syracuse, I would refer back to the Gridiron Gab triple option show that we did a couple of days ago. I mentioned this game. It was the 5 touchdown performance by Kyle McCord. So we're not going to really dabble into that. All I know is that Pittsburgh is now number 7-0. And Syracuse 5-2, and as I said, I was not sold on Kyle McCord, and I think ultimately he needs work. I think he's a little bit overrated, as I've said before. But great victory by Pittsburgh as they continue to roll. They go to 7-0, and more than likely they're going to shoot up into the top 15 as we see Eli Holston, and that as we see Rasheem Biles and that defense for Pittsburgh just continue to create for that defense and just stonewall and create turnovers and quick scoring opportunities for Pittsburgh as the Pittsburgh Panthers continue to move up and take shape for so many different so many different teams to have to take notice over or to take notice of. Number 18, Ole Miss 26, Oklahoma 14. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, well, Oklahoma got beat again. Well, this game, as I've said before, I've never been sold on Lane Kiffin and his philosophy when it comes to winning big games. This one's a semi-big game because Oklahoma is still an elite, well, I guess you could say a pretty good program right now. It's struggling to get its quarterback situations taken care of. But as I said before, everybody puts it on the quarterback. I'm gonna say more along the lines of it's the receiving aspect of it. When you lose 5 receivers, nobody can really answer for that question. And right now, Jackson Arnold went 22 of 31, 182, 2 touchdowns, and Javante Barnes had 16 carries, 62 yards, and then Taylor Tatum had 9 carries for 42 yards, as well as Arnold got in there and had 24 carries. So Oklahoma carried the football 50 times in this ball game. And ultimately, I didn't see as much creativity in the run game as I would have liked to have seen. I think that is what ultimately is going to have to happen with the Oklahoma Sooners. They're going to have to get very creative. Now, I know what people are going to say. For them to run the ball 50 times, they had to have been getting first downs. Well, of course, we look at the old tail of the tape, which they did. They got 24 first downs. They were 8 of 18 on third down, which was Ole Miss was 5 of 13 on third down. And they went for it 5 times on fourth down. Well, and then you look at the numbers game in which you see Oklahoma had 329 yards of offense compared to Oklahoma's 380. And Ole Miss had 311 yards on the ground, up in the air. And then you had 182 for Oklahoma. Then you had 147 yards on the ground for Oklahoma, and then you had 69 for Ole Miss, which is not a surprise. But Oklahoma's got to be up around 200 yards passing. They're going to have to get a lot of misdirection type pass plays, as well as their run game is going to have to be misdirections. But then you look at the time of possession in this game, 33-45 to 26-15. The only bad thing about running the football as many times as they did, you look at the fumbles. You're going to run the risk of some issues holding on to the football when you exchange it that many times. Whereas you had 2 turnovers, the turnover margin was 2-1 in favor of Ole Miss. Ole Miss only had 1 turnover, and it was a fumble. So, as I've said many times, you got home field, and considering, now this is just what I say, considering that what they were up against, they were up 14-10 at the half. You think about it. They did not score in the second half. You can't do that. Cannot not score in the second half of games. That is when you got to win the games. As we look at this, we look at the Ole Miss Rebels, and we talk about the numbers that they had. You got Jackson Dart at 22 of 30, 311 yards and a touchdown. Then you've got, really outside of that, you really got nothing. You got Caden Priestcorn had 5 catches, 71 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Watkins, 4 grabs, 59 yards. This was a game where Ole Miss had to show that they could hit. They had to show that they could hit. And they did. Chris Paul had 12 total tackles in the game. Perkins had 11. Daugherty had 10. John Saunders Jr. had 9. So you had a bunch of players that were out there just hitting it and getting their heads involved. Ole Miss showed me that they could play an old school smash mouth football game, but does that mean that I still feel like they're one of the best teams in the country? I think they got one of the best quarterbacks, probably top 10. Jackson Dart is a good player, but outside of that, it's really kind of, meh. Number 18, Ole Miss 26, Oklahoma 14. Sorry, Natasha. She had some rather choice words with me earlier, so yeah. Number 16, Kansas State 29, Kansas 27. As I told you guys, Jalen Daniels was going to have to take this game over for Kansas to win it. Now, there were moments in this game when he did assume like he was assuming the role and he was going to take over. Unfortunately for the Kansas Jayhawks, it wasn't enough, being that they came up short. No, there were several moments that I watched this game and I was thinking at any moment Jalen Johnson was going to take this game over. He had his burst moments, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, okay, this, and I think it was the third quarter where it ended up being where you see Jalen Daniels score late in the third quarter, and it gave Kansas the lead. To me, that was the point where I thought this game was going to tilt. And when you see that this didn't carry over, I thought this game was going to be over when they got ahead. And it seemed like Kansas State was kind of, I don't want to say stuck in cement, but it just seemed like at some point in this game that that Daniels was about to take this game over. He was about to push this team over the top. And I was just sitting there thinking, okay, well, I did say this on my show, and I was going to be right. But ultimately, it looked like Kansas State and the crowd just kind of, we going to settle in, we're going to use the crowd, and we're going to establish who we are. And they only scored 6 points, but the defense of Kansas State basically shut it down to the point where it was like the fourth down play that they had, it was they stopped them. You know, the Kansas State blitz was able to contain Kansas and basically eliminated, Kansas's hopes for an upset. But I still think Jalen Daniels, even though this season is a wash for them at 2-6, and if you guys remember the first show that I did, I said I thought them like Arizona were going to be serious contenders because of the quarterback play. But unfortunately for them, the coaching has not been very good, and the play, on the other hand, has not been very good. So, here we go. Kansas State 29, Kansas 27. Avery Johnson was 19 of 34, 253, 2 touchdowns. Not really impressive. DJ Giddens had 100 yards rushing in this game. So, and Jace Brown had 5 for 98. So, while Kansas State is not the most glorious team in the top 25, they're going to consistently keep moving up, and their schedule it's not necessarily a tough schedule finishing up. They do have a final matchup with Iowa, number 11 Iowa State at the end of the season, but other than that, it's all up for the taking. Number 15. Did I just say that right? Number 15, Alabama, 34. Number 21, Missouri, nothing. Now, I want you guys to understand why I had to pause there. Alabama at 15? Ain't got nothing to do with 34, nothing. Listen, what did I tell y'all guys on the show? I was shocked that there were people thinking that Missouri had a shot. Because I knew we hadn't seen the best of Alabama. I knew Kalen DeBoer knew what his boys could do. I knew Jalen Milroe was going to come out and do his thing. But here's the other thing. I want all of you to stop. Now, everybody's going to say, oh, well, Brady Cook was hurt. Okay. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I was not impressed with Missouri's passing game when he was healthy. And not to mention, Alabama had not played their best football yet. But they had Drew Pyne. Right. 6 of 12, 42 yards, 3 interceptions. Now, most of you don't know who Drew Pyne is. Drew Pyne ended up being a starter for the University of Notre Dame for a couple of, I would say about most of the year before Sam Hartman transferred in. Now, here's the reality. This is true blue reality about Missouri. Brady Cook is an okay quarterback. He is he's a tier lower than Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart in a different system could actually be dangerous. But he's not, let's not even talk about it, because as I told you guys, I was not sold on Missouri even being in the top 25. Hopefully now they'll get to go away and they won't come back. Luther Burden was shut down. Two rushes, 15 yards, and 3 catches, 3 yards. But looking at the way Alabama played this game, Milroe was 16 of 26, 215. Justice Haynes had 8 carries, 79 yards. Milroe had 11 rushes for 50. But the one thing I can look at, and I hope this is not because they were so far ahead, Alabama committed to the running game. They ran the ball 37 times for 271 yards. How long has it been since we saw an Alabama team just commit to the run like this? And see, this is what I was saying on the show. Maybe somebody's watching the show and getting memos to these coaches. They need to run the football, regardless of what Jalen Milroe can do throwing the football. The fact is, you keep that there as an ace in your pocket, not creating the ace. And I get it. Kalen DeBoer comes from a system where he wants to throw the football, but you don't have to force it. That's like Ryan Williams. He had 4 catches for 53 yards. Look, I don't need to listen to Paul Feinbaum sit here and talk up Alabama, this, that, and other. Alabama still has to show that they can consistently do what they do and do it efficiently. I don't need people like Feinbaum giving Alabama unnecessary press time. Everybody wants to sit here and give the SEC teams all the benefit of the doubt, and the fact of the matter is this conference is overinflated, as it always has been. LSU's a perfect example, as well as Missouri, and even Ole Miss itself. There's a lot of teams in the SEC that are overinflated and should not be in the top 25. Just like this whole discussion about Deion and Colorado. No, they don't need to be in the top 25. Now, looking here, the only things that I can report that number-wise, that really stood out for me was the fact that Alabama just absolutely smothered the Missouri Tigers en route to what I call was a total beatdown. You look at the numbers. They had 15 first downs, them being Missouri, but they were 3 of 13 on third down, whereas Alabama was 2 of 9 on third downs. They had only 239 yards of offense, but they had the big number is, as I always say, you guys, Mr. CeeLo's formula to the upset. They lost the turnover battle. 3 turnovers to none. Can't turn the football over. Big no-no. They won the time of possession by 2 seconds. They were outrushed by over 100 yards. Tail of the tape speaks for itself. Number 15, Alabama 34. 21 ranked Missouri, nothing. Number 13, Indiana 31. Washington 17. Now, I don't want people to look at this game and think, wow, was this game a rout, or was it just a doctored up score? No, Indiana really made this a game, and they led 7-0 at the end of one, and they were up 17. Washington only trailed 17-7 at the half. So this is not like this was a game that got out of hand. And I'm going to be honest with you, this was a game that if Washington was going to win, and it's like I tell you guys all the time, if you're going to pull the upset, you cannot turn the football over. And they did. They turned it over with 2 interceptions. And we look here, the time of possession was 31 minutes to 28 minutes. Indiana by 3 minutes. And then here's the other thing that's most importantly. Washington was only 3 of 11 on third downs. That's not what a winning formula. You have to commit on the money downs. You have to make those money downs. And the yards were equal. 318 to 312. Washington had 202 yards passing. Indiana 124. But the running game for Indiana was massive. 188 to 116. And what I really liked is that the Hoosiers, basically in a nutshell said, hey, look, we're going to be who we are, but we're not going to commit the turnovers. Justice Ellison's 123 yards on the ground and a score paced these guys. You had Taven Jackson, 11 of 19, 124 yards. They were not going to lose by turnovers. Will Rogers was 19 of 26, 202 yards, and the 2 interceptions. The most important thing you can do in these games is not commit turnovers, because Jonah Coleman had 19 carries, 104 yards. And you cannot make these kind of mistakes. That is imperative that you don't make those kind of mistakes. And Washington did, which put them behind the 8 ball in many situations. And they were out, especially being outscored 17-7 and being outscored 14-10 in both halves. You have to take every quarter as new quarter, new game. It's 0-0. You have to take every situation as new quarter, new game. And unfortunately for Washington, they weren't able to do that, as the Indiana Hoosiers cruised to 8-0 for the first time since 1967. Congrats to you, Indiana Hoosier fans, and keep climbing up the rankings. But as I said before, the further up you go and the more wins you rack up, the more you stand on teams' radar. Number 12, Notre Dame, 51. Navy, 14. Now, most people are going to look at this game and say, well, there ain't no difference between what we've seen before. Well, actually there is. Because Navy was undefeated, if most of you didn't know. And coming into this game, Notre Dame's offense was suspect. And even from my estimations, there's still some things that Notre Dame's got to get worked out. Riley Leonard's got to show he's a pure pocket passer, and I'm not sure he did. He had a pretty good game, 13 for 21, 178 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a long one to Bo Collins of 37. But the story of this game was Blake Horvath had 88 yards passing, an interception. He had 129 yards on the ground and a touchdown. But here's the big thing. He also had 2 lost fumbles. And as a team, the midshipmen had 5 turnovers just on fumbles. They had another, and as we said earlier, they had an interception. So they had 6 turnovers against the Irish. Not exactly what you want. You do not want to turn the ball over if you are You do not want to turn the ball over if you're coming in here, as I said before, even if you're at home. But if you are not the favorite, even if you are the favorite, you still do not want to turn the football over. You do not want to have to come in and have to play at a deficit. And that is ultimately what you're doing when you turn the football over. And Notre Dame was able to come out and they were able to capitalize on several short fields. I want to say 4 short fields. So that's why you look at the numbers and they're not overly impressive. Now, they did have 40 carries for 265 yards running the football. And ultimately, what it is you want to look at, you do want to look and say, okay, did we stop Riley Leonard? Did we stop Jeremiah Love? No, you did not. Love had 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Leonard had 83 yards and a score. And fortunately for the Irish, the turnovers were enough. The Irish had enough turnovers to basically take this game and run away with it. Although I will say that the Navy midshipmen have a heck of an offense. They have a heck of an offense, and it cannot recover when you're turning the ball over. This is not a team that is built to fix things when they're not going their way. Brad, I hate to disappoint you, but yeah. Now, I will say this. Does this prove that we're a top 10 football team? Not really. Turnovers are part of the game, but I will say it like this. They don't prove that you are better than what you are. I just don't think so. Now, a lot of people are going to say, what are you talking about? Well, I'm a realist because most of you guys don't know I'm an Irish fan. But ultimately, I don't think this game right here proved very much because they were just unforced errors. We benefited from them. Notre Dame 51, Navy 14. As the Navy midshipmen will probably move out of the top 25. It was awesome seeing them here. Hopefully they can get back in here because they have a really good offense. I don't care what you guys say. 6 turnovers are what killed these guys. Number 11, BYU 37, Central Florida 24. Now, looking at BYU from the front, this game was very, very entertaining because when you go to the halftime, it was BYU 24, Central Florida 10. And right there at the end, when it looked like this game was out of reach, 37-10, the Central Florida Knights made a run and made this game close. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, they just ruined points. Well, in essence, you got a point. LJ Martin had 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Ropati also had 83 yards. So it was really a dominating performance for BYU's running attack, giving them their first 8-0 run since 2020. It's the 5th time in the school's history that they've been 8-0. But I'm very impressed with the way their defense plays. They're a very active defense. And BYU has always been that type of team that runs that 3-4 heavy pressure type defense, and which generated 2 turnovers by the Central Florida Knights. And the only thing that they've got to get over is they've got to get over these turnovers. But I will give the fans in Orlando a lot of credit. They were very hyper at the very beginning of this game until the Cougars sucked the life out of the building. But looking here, Central Florida being one of the top rushing schools in the nation, they were able to come out and the BYU was able to come out and outrush them despite what the crowd was able to get them. But I think ultimately this game was decided on third downs, where you look, BYU is 7 of 15 on third downs, whereas you have the Central Florida Knights, they were 2 of 10. And this is huge when you think about the money down. This is what I call it, the money down. And as we've always talked about, in order for you to win, you've got to make Mr. Cilo's formula to the upset. And unfortunately, they did not make it. The 2 key elements that Central Florida has to have, they lost mightily. The time of possession was 40 minutes. BYU had the ball 40 minutes. And against this team, if you get behind, you're going to get in trouble because they like to control the pace of the game. They're like Army and they're like Navy. They like to control the pace of the game. They also had 1 turnover. Central Florida had 2. So, as we said, they did not win the turnover battle. They did not win the time of possession. So that's never a good thing. But ultimately, BYU moves up, and they're going to continue to be a spot on the radar for many teams to look at as they go to 8-0, and they're going to probably move into the top 10. BYU 37, Central Florida 24. Now, I watched this game, and look, this game was fun. Fun. Number 14, A&M 38. Number 8, LSU 23. And just another disclaimer, LSU shouldn't have been number 8. This is another one of those teams that, as I've said many a times, you're overrating them. Why? Because they're in the Southeastern Conference. Boo. Now, many people are not going to understand what I'm about to say, but this was a game that looked like it was a That's what this game looked like. And by that I mean it was 17-7. And it looked like nothing was going to happen for A&M. And all of a sudden, you had Mike Elko look over there and make a decision that is probably going to go down as one of the decisions that is probably going to shape the remainder of this season. And he called on the freshman, Marcel Reed, who went 2 of 2 passing, had a beautiful throw down the field. Made a beautiful throw to Noah Thomas for 54. which was a lot longer than anything else they'd thrown. And this is where I'm just going to be honest. If you have a guy that's a weapon like this on the bench and you can't get anything going, at some point you need to make the decision. When are we going to make the decision to make the switch? We got to make the switch. And I respect Mike Elko because when this kid came in, you guys are not going to believe. This guy came in. Not only did he win the game, they scored 31 points in the second half. To Connor Wigman's displeasure, because they showed the reaction on the sideline. But let's just look at it. He was 6 of 18, 64 yards. And the team was just, Now, look at this. Amari Daniels finished with 91 yards on the ground. Le'Veon Moss finished with 83 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Marcel Reed himself had 62 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. This has just eliminated everything that LSU had done. And see, this is where you have to understand that they sold out to Connor Wigman. This tells you right then and there, this was all Brian Kelly. He can get PO'd at whoever he wants. Now, Nussmeier was not great. Once again, he was 50% completing 50% of his passes. He threw for 405 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's a case of inflated statistics because you had some bad spots. Now, I'm going to say it like this. I did see some things I did not like. They were amped. And there was, I can't remember who the player was that he kept doing some things on the defensive side. He was very active, but he needed to tone it down. I can't remember what his name was. I don't want to call his name and it's not correct. But you had Nick Scorton for them had a half sack. DJ Hicks had a sack. Ryland Kennedy had a sack, and they had 6 tackles for losses. Now, LSU had 4 sacks. Braden Swinson, Greg Penn, Zy Alexander, and Javari Suggs. BJ Mays and Torian York also had interceptions. Mays had 2 interceptions. And ultimately, even though Wigman didn't throw a pick, he was just ineffective. They couldn't run the football. He was on the field, and they just couldn't complete anything. So ultimately, what you have to do is you have to be able to manufacture some offense. And they have not been able to do that. And ultimately, I thought Elko did the right thing. And believe it or not, a lot of people are going to say, well, you don't want to keep going back and forth to a quarterback. You ultimately want to pick one and stay with it. I don't think you can afford to make the change this late in the season. Yeah, you are 7-1, but I think ultimately he needs to be your bullpen guy. I think you still stay with Wigman, and you don't want teams to have to practice. You give them the luxury of practicing for 2 different type of players. That's a luxury you can have. Ultimately, he does such a phenomenal job with the read option. That's what you need to do, and he creates opportunities for 2 different running backs. That's just how dynamic this guy is. But I'm going to be honest with you. I was watching this game. I was thinking, okay, boring. Uh-oh. And I didn't watch Kelly's press conference, but I'm going to tell you right now. Marcel Reed, you and your defensive coordinator should have had this in your back pocket. This is on you. This ain't on your players. They were prepped for a guy who was decently mobile. They weren't prepped for an elite runner. And then not to mention, you scored 6 points in the second half. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Let's look at the tail of the tape. Let's go to Mr. CeeLo's. You remember what I said? Or Mr. CeeLo's formula to pulling the upset? Let's take a look. LSU had 20 first downs, A&M 17. That just shows you how deep A&M was and how bad their offense was performing. Third down efficiency, 8 of 17, 6 of 15 for A&M. Both teams didn't convert a fourth down. LSU still had more yardage. They had almost 50 yards more offense than A&M. Get this, guys. LSU only had 24 yards of rushing. Watch this one. A&M had 242 total rushing yards. But A&M also had 10 penalties. But here's the other thing. LSU had 3 turnovers to 1. And they won the time of possession. Not by much. It was only a minute. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where it really gets interesting. You look at the dominant performance on the passing yards. 405 to 134. 405 to 134. That's just absolutely insane. But Texas A&M 38. They upset LSU, number 8 LSU, which I don't see as an upset. They shouldn't have been number 8. Number 6 Miami 36. Florida State 14. All I can say is I'm glad that the Miami Hurricanes didn't go out there and just absolutely try to blow up the Florida State Seminoles. It was a pretty good game. Cam Ward had only 208 yards. I will say this. I don't want to say it's they took it easy on them, but you could tell this was Miami knew what they were dealing with. They did not want to go out and I'm never going to say that that's what I assumed, but Miami didn't go out there. They knew they were a better team, and they went out there and they put a decent enough show on to get the win. And that's ultimately what it's about. Going in there, getting the win, and not having the daggum blow the doors off of somebody. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of going out there blowing the doors off of a football team. Miami invited them in, and they did what they had to do, and they pulled out a couple of trick plays that they're going to use probably later on. But looking here, Damian Martinez had 148 yards on the ground, 2 scores. Mark Fletcher had 71 yards on the ground for a touchdown. And as I said, this was one of those games that Cam Ward put in his back pocket and said, okay, we got this. Let's get out of here with the win. We know what we're dealing with. This is not a team we have to fear. Like I said, Miami goes to 8-0. First time they've been 8-0 since 2017. Florida State falls to 1-6. I hate it for Mike Norvell. This is a learning experience, and hopefully they're going to grow from it, but I don't see it being that way. They'll probably part ways with him just after last year being undefeated. I don't want them to get rid of him because I think he can get this program back to prominence. But right now, that's probably what it's going to look like. People don't have patience anymore. It would be surprising if they hung around. I'll go ahead and tell you what I think. I think Deion will end up being the next coach. Just write it down. Mr. CeeLo told you first. But not much to report in this game. Miami 36, Florida State 14. Florida State fought valiantly, but Miami you could tell which team was the better team, and ultimately they were just the better team, and they came out victorious. Number 5, Texas 27. Number 25, Vanderbilt 24. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is the one team in the Southeastern Conference that I can honestly say is going to be the mosquito of the bunch. They are very irritating. They are a very competitive football team. They come out here, they play really hard, and this game was a game that easily could have been another letdown because the Longhorns scored 21 points in the first half and only scored 6 in the second. Now, you got a lot of people that, like myself, I do like the Vanderbilt Commodores. I think they're a couple of players away. I think Diego Pavia plays over his head. I think he plays with it on fire. But I think ultimately, when you get a guy like him and you don't have another guy out there like him, it's an issue. Because you need a bunch of guys out there that play with their hair on fire. I think this whole defense for the Vanderbilt plays that way. They're very aggressive and they're very opportunistic when they see their opportunity to get takeaways. A lot of people would say Quinn Ewers had a better game, 27-37, 3 touchdowns and an interception. but he was also sacked 4 times. Fontenay had a sack and a half. Mike Capers had a half a sack. Kadori Sidnor had a sack, and Nicholas Rinaldi had a sack. And believe it or not, the Longhorns did not have a single sack of Pavia. This is an issue if you're the Longhorns. This can't be a situation where you're not getting to the quarterback, especially for the likes of Vanderbilt. Now, am I saying Vanderbilt's a bad team? They're not amongst the elites, and that's a problem. And the reality of it is, you have to be able to get to the quarterback to be one of those elite programs in the country. And they're well away from that right now, and that being the Longhorns. You have to be able to get to the quarterback. Vanderbilt looked more like that. And now here's the thing. Everybody's talking about Ewers' performance. I still saw some of the same things I saw in that game against Alabama. The inability to have pocket presence. Now, I will say, Texas is banged up on that offensive line. But the truth of the matter is, Ewers has got to know that. This is a serious situation. I'm going to put it like this. Quinn Ewers saved his season. Quinn Ewers saved his season. Because I'm going to be honest with you, if they lose another football game, he's got to go. This is not even trying to be mean. He's got to go. He's got to go bye-byes. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. He's got to go bye-byes. There's no way you can hang on and you've lost this season, and Quinn Ewers is continuously making the same type of errors. You cannot do this. You cannot make these type of errors. It's basic pocket presence. It's as simple as that. It's basic pocket presence. Anyhow, I enjoyed the game. I thought the way this game kept going back and forth, especially when you watch the interceptions that Ewers was throwing. There's a lot of people that are saying, "Oh, well, the Ewers showed me something." He didn't show me a lot. He really didn't. And then Vanderbilt, on the other hand, didn't help their own cause. Pavia threw 2 big interceptions, and that's the thing. You cannot throw interceptions against this type of team and think you're going to be successful. See, so not only did they lose time of possession, they also lost the turnovers. Now let's look up here at third down. 3 of 12. Did not win any of the big ones. Not good. So, did Vanderbilt have the ability to be successful? Almost. They had home field. Anywho, Texas 27, Vanderbilt 24, as they will probably be saying bye-bye to the top 25. Number 4, Ohio State, and Matt Rule's Nebraska Cornhuskers 17. This game, I'm just going to say it like this. Matt Rule's got to be belligerent when it comes to what he saw in this game from an offensive standpoint, because you could not play this game any better defensively. You got everything you wanted. But see, the thing is, when you play a game like this on the road, everything's got to go right and then some. Let's look at the tail. 18 first downs to Ohio State's 11. They converted 5 of 16 third downs to only 1 of 10 for Ohio State. Ohio State had 12 more yards, 285 to 273, and that's total yards. Ohio State had 221 yards passing to Nebraska's 152. But Nebraska ran it for 121, and I think all of you already know where the difference was. And, of course, 7 for 62 in penalties, which I thought there were a couple of penalties that were very questionable. So that's what I mean when we say you have to play extra on your toes when you're playing on the road. You can't just do it right. You got to do it exceptionally right. And then we look at the time of possession where Ohio State, they had the ball 11 minutes longer. Turnover battle was equal, 1-1. That one turnover is what killed you. That one interception. Dylan Raiola was pretty good. He's pretty good. I must admit. 9 carries, 31 yards, had 152 yards passing, 1 interception. Will Howard, 221, 3 touchdowns and a pick. But really, this is one of those, Carnell Tate was the only guy that really, he had 102 yards and a touchdown. So, yeah, when you really look at this game from its totality, if you watch the game and say, man, Ohio State didn't look that good, it's a combination of how well the Nebraska Cornhuskers played. I mean, people look at that drubbing they took last week. Look, a friend of the show has always said, when a team gets their butts whooped and they're a quality football team, you better look out if you're on their schedule next. You better look out if you're next on the schedule. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Because you look at this game, Nebraska led this game for the better part of 4 minutes. When they took the lead on that Dante Dowdle touchdown run, and they got the 2-point conversion, you heard a gasp inside of the horseshoe. Make no mistake about it. But I thought they made their move. I thought it was a great move. And it's almost like a chess move. They was like, they basically were in a nutshell. Hey, look, we're gonna do it like this, and we're gonna see if we can keep it close and then get ahead right there at a certain moment and see if we can't shift the momentum. And it almost worked. It almost worked. But, it's tough being in Matt Rhule's situation at this point, because the lone interception they threw was a killer. It was a dagger. You give up the touchdown, and ultimately you can't get it in. The last drive you throw a pick. And, yeah. But Matt Rhule's guys have nothing to hang their heads about. This was a game where they did everything right except right there at the end. Number 4, but Ohio State's got questions. They got question marks. They got to get back to running the football. That's ultimately what it boils down to, because this game was one they should have lost. Had it been in Lincoln, they lose. Number 3, Penn State 28, Wisconsin 13. This is another one of those games where I'm going to say Braden Locke threw a pass that I'm still wondering, what the heck was that? I'm like, bruh, what are you doing? And because Drew Allen left this game, and it was apparent Bo Pribula was unable to move the offense. They scored 21 points in the second half, and you only kicked the field goal. And then what that field goal came off of was a deep pass that you hit. And I'm going to be honest with you. Wisconsin, y'all got to get you a quarterback. I don't care how you do it. Transfer portal. I mean, look, Russell Wilson that was the last quarterback that really scared anybody. And it's like, dude, come on now. What are we doing here? How is it we're not able to get the quarterback position right? I said, Braden Locke, I don't get it. When Aller went out the game, I said to myself, they're in trouble. They are in some serious trouble. Even with the running game, they had 81 yards on the ground, and then you go to Penn State. Penn State had 173 yards on the ground, and it's like, how? I'm dead serious. I'm like, how? But that was the tail of the tape. You had Katron Allen had 86 yards rushing and score. And as a team, Penn State had 173 yards on the ground and a touchdown. And really, there was nothing else to talk about. Hunter Waller had 11 tackles. Jaheim Thomas had 9 for the Badgers. Zakee Wheatley had 10 total tackles. And Jake Chaney for Wisconsin had the lone sack in this game. But it ultimately comes down to Wisconsin had the opportunity and they just didn't get it done. That was a sleeper game, but I did check out 2/3 of it. Number 3, Penn State 28, Wisconsin 13. And the finale, which was a sleeper as well. Yeah. Looking at this Oregon Illinois game, it was a classic case of Illinois came in and yeah, this wasn't pretty. This was a straight up smackdown. That's the only thing that it can be described as, a straight up smackdown. Dillon Gabriel had 291 yards and 3 touchdowns and an interception. Luke Altmaier had 2 picks. That's not what you could afford in this game if you're Illinois. You go from being this high-powered offense and you come in here for a super octane offense that they came in here and they wasn't playing with you. They all about bringing that juice. And they did. They came out and they brought that juice. Dillon Gabriel was all over the place. Even Jordan James, he had 83 yards on the ground. Oregon had a total of 229 yards on the ground. That's not what you want to see when you're facing Oregon. And then you get Dillon Gabriel nearly throwing for 300. Tez Johnson was great again. 6 catches, 102 yards, and a touchdown. Yeah, this was a game where it looked like the offensive line for Oregon and the fans. Look, I'm going to say it like this. This is a perfect example of how when you go into a hostile stadium, it ain't no fun. I mean, there were times it looked like that, even though there were no penalties, struggled with this crowd all day. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, they didn't get no false starts. Well, it looked like many times that they couldn't get it figured out, whether it was the snap counts or whether it was getting guys lined up, whatever. This is why I say all the time, when Southeastern Conference is always talking about we so tough and we this and that, go to somebody else's building and try that. Go to the Horseshoes and the Happy Valleys and the Autzen Zoos, or, just the big stadiums, the opposite stadiums that you don't go to. It's easy to sit there and say, I can beat a team in my conference. You see them. You know them. But as I said, that was an impressive win. I will give Oregon its just due. But, as I said, you're supposed to win those games at home. But, winning big like this is what you're supposed to do when you're 20 spots better than the team that you're hosting. But 38-9 as number 1 Oregon disposes of the 20th ranked Illini, as it was not a good game for them. As I said, they lost the turnover battle and they lost the time of possession battle and the total yards gained. So this was not what you wanted to see if you were the Illinois Illini. So ultimately, what it's going to boil down to is the Oregon Ducks are the top dog. But now, let's go and look at the top 25, which was just released about an hour ago. Let's see. Missouri only drops 4 spots to... Really? You done got your butt handed to you in your 2 losses, and you 25? Who in the world is making these? I want to know who's voting for this. Unreal. I would have rather seen Navy stay at 25 than to see Missouri should have been gone. Illinois drops 4 to 24, maybe. Colorado, really? They ain't beat nobody. Is that what we're doing now? Colorado has not one good win on their resume. Not one. Yeah. Washington State. I could see that. They move up from being unranked. Army moves up 2. They're at 7-0. SMU moves up 2. Okay. Ole Miss at 19. Ain't no way. Ole Miss should be at 21. SMU should have been at 19. No. Pittsburgh 7-0. They move up 1. Agreed. Kansas State moves down 1. Ain't no way. LSU should be down further. LSU is 16. They only moved down 8. No, they should have been. No. Boise State moves up 2 spots to number 15. Alabama moves up 1. Indiana stays idle at 8-0. Clemson drops down 2 spots to number 11 on an idle week. Iowa State drops down 1 on an idle week as well. Texas A&M moves up 4. As a friend of the show said, he said there was going to be justification to move them up and Notre Dame up. BYU moves up 2 spots, being undefeated at number 9. Notre Dame moves into the top 10 as well, up 4 spots to number 8. Tennessee remains idle on an off week. Texas moves down 1. Miami moves up 1 after their resounding victory over Florida State. I don't know how that works. Ohio State stays put. Penn State stays put. Georgia stays put at number 2. Oregon remains put at number 1. Now, like I said, you guys, before we get out of here, I'm going to make a huge objection to Colorado because they've beaten no one this year. And everybody's going to say, oh, they beat who's on their schedule. Well, here's the reality. You can beat who's on your schedule, but the reality of it is that doesn't impress me. That counts for something who's on your schedule. You have the ability to go out and play people, but you chose to go out and play somebody like North Dakota State. Just saying. Prime. You so prime, go get a prime matchup. Yeah, I get it. You went and got the Bison, which nobody hardly does. Nobody hardly goes and gets the Bison. But the truth of the matter is, you are what your schedule says you are, and your record. Not a fan of Coach Prime, never will be.
Stop the cap.
I'll make you famous. I'll make you famous.
But anyhow, let me know what you guys think, as well as go into the comment section when you add yourself to the Gridiron Gab Triple Option family. Make sure you say it down in the comments, and also comment. Don't let Brad be the only one going back and forth with me. Also, if you don't like what I said about Coach Prime, let's go. If you want to say I'm a hater, please elaborate. Because there's a lot of coaches around the league doing way better than him, but we don't give them the same press, do we?
So?
Don't do it. I'll eat you alive. Also, go to the Gridiron Gab Triple Option page and add yourself to the Gridiron Gab family on Facebook. Finally, go to Mr. CeeLo on Instagram and find out all the wonderful things that we are involved in. But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.